All right, welcome. Sexual reproduction and development in plants. So we just finished animal reproduction. We're now going to get into plants. Remember, plants can reproduce asexually. We already talked about that right after we did mitosis. All right, we talked about asexual. Now we're going to get into sexual. All right, so gymnosperms, these are going to be your cone-bearing plants. So your coniferous trees, the ones with cones. I'm not sure if you looked really close, but they do have seeds on the surface. All right, but we're going to spend more time, and if you're more interested in this process, you can look in the textbook. There's a whole chapter about it. But the Regents has you learn more specifically and dive into angiosperms. These are our flowering plants. Okay, they have seeds that develop into protective structures. So right now it's springtime. You're starting to see tulips come up, daffodils, other flowers. These are your angiosperms. Inside, you will notice this because you see the stamen and the pistil. All right, so let's get started with the stamen and the pistil. The pistil is the female reproductive organ. On top, it has a sticky stigma. A sticky stigma. So the female, the pistil, is typically in the center. So there's the female, think of the female in the center, and then there's the stamen. These are all the male reproductive organs around her. All right, and the female's in the center. And I like to think of your head, like the top of your head is a sticky stigma. That's where the pollen's going to land, the male sex cell. So the sticky stigma is held up by the style, okay, and it's at the base is the ovary. All right, so sticky stigma here, and then you'll see the pollen's going to travel down, but there's the female gonad, the ovary is down here. All right, what are the female gametes? They're not going to use the word egg or ovum. It's ovules. Ovules, the female gamete. All right, this is where fertilization occurs. There isn't a line here. There should be. Go ahead and add that in your note packet. This is where fertilization occurs. All right, so let's talk about the male reproductive organs, the stamen. So here's a little trick to help you remember it. Box out the M-E-N, men. Stamen. So the men, stamen are around. Think about, do you know any females that are, I don't know, feisty, the feisty pistil, okay, in the center, and there's the stamen, the male reproductive organs around. So highlight male reproductive organs. This consists of an anther and a filament, and there are pollen grains that contain the male sperm. So yes, people that are allergic to pollen this time of year, trees, grasses, you're allergic to the male gamete, the male sex cell in the plant. All right, the sepal you have, the receptacle, and then the petals as well. All right, but you really want to know the pistil. Let's highlight the pistil, the stigma, the style, the ovary, and then the ovule, and then the stamen, the anther, and the filament. All right? All right, pollination. What actually is pollination? You've heard this. This is when you actually have the transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma. Now, the tulip can do it. If that was a tulip, it could do it on the same plant. If it's the same plant and the wind blows and the pollen lands right on the sticky stigma on the same plant, that would be self-pollination. Now, what if your tulip, the wind blows and it goes across your yard to the other side or to the neighbor's yard? That's going to be cross-pollination. All right, I don't think we need to write the definition. I think that you understand by just the word, right? Self-pollination on the same plant, cross to a different plant. But let's say daffodil pollen lands on my tulip, what's going to happen? If my daffodil pollen lands on my tulip, it's a whole different species. What's going to happen? Nothing. All right? The pollen has to be recognized. So if the pollen is recognized, then it germinates. Okay, you need to know that word. If the pollen is recognized, it germinates. What does that mean? So this right here, this is an enlarged view of the pistil. Okay, so there's the sticky stigma. These are the words you have to know. There's some extra higher level biology stuff on here, but the pollen grain lands, there's on the sticky stigma. What forms is this, the pollen tube. Okay, so a pollen tube grows down into the style. So now let's say it's the tulip's pollen from across the yard that lands on another tulip. That's going to be recognized. So when that pollen lands, it's recognized, and then the pollen tube grows into the style, and it brings down that pollen grain to the ovule. Pollen grain grows into the style to the ovary where the gametes fuse. So the gametes will fuse down in the ovary. Okay, now this is really important. The gametes are actually going to turn into seeds, and then the ovary into fruit. So let's repeat that. You're eating an apple. What are you eating? Okay, the entire ovary is the fruit. So apples, peaches, pears. When you eat fruit, you're eating the whole ovary of that plant. In the middle are the seeds, right? That's the gametes. They turn into the seeds. And what is the whole point of this? You hear, oh, spread your seed. The bear spreads the seed. They're helping reproduction. Okay, the bear goes and eats the apple. The apple is sugar, right? Fruit is attractive to animals. They eat so here you are in Central Square. I don't know, a deer, a bear eats the apple and then eliminates the feces 20 miles north of here. We don't digest the seeds, right? We've talked about this back, that hard, what's in our feces. We eliminate that hard cellulose material. It's in our feces. That roughage we talked about, high fiber diets, that will come out in the feces, and hopefully the point is that the seed is spread and there'll be a new plant reproducing, another apple tree or whatever it is. All right, so you got to actually know the anatomy of a seed. So the anatomy of a seed. You have something called the epicotyl, hypocotyl, cotyledon, and seed coat. Okay, this isn't too hard to grasp, but the epi means like on the surface. This is going to turn into what's above ground, the stem and leaves. Remember plant structure, we have stem, leaves, and roots. So let's look at this. See what it even looks like. You can tell as it's starting to germinate, like that's looking like the upper portion above the ground, the stem and the leaves. So epicotyl turns into stem and leaves. Hypo, remember we did hyper is above, hypo below, too much, not enough. Hypo, this part is going to turn into the root. Okay. The cotyledon, the entire part of the seed is full of starch, sugar, to make ATP. Used, right, by the mitochondria, so the processes can continue. Cotyledon stores the food. And then the seed coat is on the edge, and just like you wear a coat, it protects you, right, from the weather, different things. All right, go to your picture packet. I want to practice labeling. All right, so there you are. You're looking at an angiosperm. You only need to label what I have numbers on. So where's the female? There's the feisty pistil in the center. These are the male, the stamen. Okay, and this is labeled for you. If that's the stamen, oops, did I skip that? I just want to make sure. The top part of, actually we need to highlight anther and filament. The top part of the stamen, it looks like a little button on top. That's the anther. And then the stalk of the stamen, that's the filament. I jumped right to pollen grains when I talked about the male. But the little button on top is the anther, and the stalk is the filament. Okay, so when you look at the stamen, yes, that's the pollen grains. We can go ahead and write pollen grains there. But the anther is the button, and then the stalk is the filament. There's the pistil, right? So that's the enlarged pistil, and there's the name there. Think of the pollen has to land on the sticky stigma. Stigma. Like the stalk part coming down, we called that one the filament. This is called the style. They're S's. So keep the S's together. And there's the ovary with the ovules. So the ovules are the eggs, and this is the ovary. Okay, not too bad. You have to be able to recognize that. All right, here is pollination. So let's label this germinating pollen grain. The only way this would happen is if it's recognized. It has to be the same species. So say this is a daffodil, then the daffodil's germinating pollen, or the daffodil's pollen grains landed, and then it will germinate. It has to be recognized. So sticky stigma again, so write stigma, and then pollen tube. That's all you need to label in that. That's at this level of biology, as long as you know that's the stigma, and the pollen tube will bring the pollen grain down to the ovule. All right, and here's the seed. Outer edge for protection, right? So write seed coat. And I would like the function next to these, please. Protects. Okay, the main part of the seed, right, is the cotyledon. Cotyledon. Stores sugar. We could put them in parentheses, I guess. All right, now there's two words here, epicotyl and hypocotyl. Epi, think above, hypo, below. So what's going to turn into the leaf, the plant structure above? Okay, this would be the epicotyl. This is going to turn into your leaf and your stem. Leaves, stems. Okay, and the only other structure in the plant that we've talked about, leaves, stems, roots, would be roots. And that's going to go down. That's the hypo. Perfect. And there you have the plants. So definitely look the notes over. It will be on the test. There will definitely be some plant questions. All right, sticky stigma on the pistil, the female in the center. Stamens are on the outside. This is an angiosperms. Gymnosperms are cone-bearing. Pollination occurs if the pollen grains are recognized. It has to be the same species. It will then germinate and head down. And then you need to know the structure in the seed. The cotyledon is full of starch. The seed coats for protection. The epicotyl turns into what's above the surface, stems and leaves, and the hypocotyl turns into roots.